Hi, hi everyone. I think that's me back now. I'm getting a bit of echo. I'm not sure if I'm coming back on somebody's speakers, but I'm chairing this session and we've got some great speakers lined up. One of our speakers has withdrawn their talk, so it means that our second talk will last half an hour instead of 15 minutes. But first of all, our first speaker is Julien, Jeune, and Andrew Gumley, and they're going to be talking about MSc and digital health interventions. So if we can invite Julien onto the stage, please, that would be great. And just to remind everybody, if you've got questions, please pop them in the Q&A chat. Thanks.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Vicky. It will be just me presenting this morning. Andrew could not join us. Well done, Vicky, as well. It was a very good effort. So I'll just start sharing my slides. I hope everyone can see that. So thank you all for coming along this morning. So this morning I'm going to be giving you a quick run through of a co-production project that we ran last year on our course, which is the Masters in Digital Health Interventions. So just to give you a bit of background on the course, so it's a relatively new course, which began in 2020. So there's 4 core courses on the program, 3 of which have been specifically developed for the program. So you can see those 3 up there. So since we kind of launched the course, we've been taking an iterative approach to course development. And within that, we really wanted to focus on kind of student feedback and include that within our refinement of the course content. And then just to give you a bit of background on co-production. So basically, there's also different definitions out there for co-production, but basically it can be described as working in partnership with users of a service in order to develop or improve that service. And it should lead to kind of materials and products that are more useful to the target population. So co-production is a very important concept in the development of DHIs. And so because of that, it is a topic which is the focus of teaching on the Developing DHIs course. And it's so important that we actually devote 2 full weeks of learning to this topic. So just a quick overview of the project itself. So during the kind of student feedback that we got after the first run of the program, our students highlighted that they would have benefited from a more standardized approach to teaching delivery across the 3 core courses. So in response to that, we invited Dr. expert in co-production and who delivered the teaching for us on co-production to lead a co-production project. And the aim of this project was to produce a lesson plan that was common to all the DHI core courses. So 3 co-production sessions were organized. The first one included the teaching staff, so that was myself and Andrew. The second one involved the students. And then finally, there was a kind of final joint session with both student and teaching staff. So Dr. French kind of designed and ran all of these sessions. And at the end of the project, there were 2 main project outputs. I got templates of these, which I can share with you. And I'll put a link to those in the chat at the end. So these 2 outputs were the lesson plan and then also the lesson plan guidance. So I'm just going to give you a quick run through of the 3 sessions. Like I said, involved the teaching staff. So that was a program director, Andrew Gumley, and myself. This was an hour-and-a-half long session led by Dr. French. And across these 3 sessions, Miro was used. I'm not sure if all of you are familiar with it. It's record discussions and use post-it notes, digital post-it notes to take notes and stuff. So Dr. French used that to kind of frame and record the discussion that took place within the different sessions. So the aims of the session were to evaluate the existing program format and experience from the teaching side, and then also identify areas of opportunity for future formats and kind of course development. So there were 2 main activities that took place during this first session. The first one was a reflection on program format. So what were the expectations of the program or the initial intentions behind the kind of format that we'd taken? How did the design of the program meet these expectations? And how did the format work well? And we know what hadn't worked so well. The second activity was to distill key principles for lesson planning. So again, what has worked well in this first year of the course in terms of lesson planning? What are some things that we could take forward for next year? And also looking at some kind of lesson plan examples and critiquing them and seeing whether or not they would be useful for our courses. Then in the second session, there were 5 MSc DHI students who attended. So this was a longer session. It was 2 hours long. Again, we used Miro to kind of record the conversations. The same aims of the session applied for this one. The only difference really was the students were invited to take part in a pre-session activity, which you can see here. So it was a snakes and ladders postcard activity. So students were invited to reflect on identifying learning facilitators, which were kind of illustrated as ladders, and obstacles, which are illustrated as snakes. So you can see here, this is what the students received ahead of the session. So it's kind of formatting or, designing the session in order to get them to think about teaching a different way so that they can express themselves more easily. So again, there were similar activities from the first session for the students. So reflecting on what we've done was the first activity. The second one was identifying what could be done better next year in terms of enhancing the student experience. And then finally, again, distilling key lesson planning principles based on discussions from those first 2 activities. And then at the end of the second session, Dr. French opportunities have a bit of a kind of educational component. So she talked to the students about why she designed the sessions the way she had and how it related to session aims, to kind of give students a bit of information about co-design in practice. So moving on to staff and students. So the aim of the session here was to refine the key principles that had emerged from the first 2 sessions and work together to co-produce lesson plan and lesson plan guidance. So the session started by Dr. French giving a short presentation on the key findings from the first 2 sessions. And then the first activity involved thinking about what an ideal week of learning looked like from a student perspective and from a teaching perspective. And then based on that discussion, we used the key learnings to create a lesson plan guidance document and to think about what would be included. So moving on to the actual project output. So the main project output plan is something we've kind of implemented this year, and it's the plan which is the same for on all 3 courses. Each plan has the same layout and types of learning. The plan lists all the teaching sessions for that week, materials and activities that students are expected to complete for that week. It also kind of highlights which ones are maybe more optional and which ones are essential. Within this lesson plan, all the learning materials are hyperlinked to allow for easy access. So on the course, we don't really use Moodle that much. We host everything on Teams. So everything on the lesson plan is hyperlinked to Teams to allow for easy access. And again, just highlighting there that the plan tells students when they should engage with the different teaching materials. So there's teaching materials, there's post-lecture teaching materials, pre-seminar, post-seminar. So it really allows the students to plan their learning effectively. I've got a short video here showing you an example of lesson plans. We've got the week with the title, a kind of nice overview there, which hyperlinks to the relevant section. So that you can see the key readings for the lecture. You can kind of list the ILOs that are relevant for that week of the learning. There's a discussion prompt. There you can see the link to the PDF on Teams to make it easier for students to access the reading. Reading list links to the lecture slides ahead of the session. The date and time of the lecture, the quiz, the seminar materials. So as you can see, it kind of really clearly lists all the teaching sessions and the materials that students are expected to engage with for that week of learning. And then the second output was the lesson plan guidance document. So this guidance includes the ILOs. So it kind of asks the lecturer to include the ILOs that are going to be covered in the session, includes the lesson planning principles and the lecture breakdown. So the lesson planning principles, these are the kind of 5 key principles that emerge from the co-production project. So the first one is, where possible, make sure to include opportunities interaction to promote student engagement. So within your lecture, make sure that you have discussion prompts or quiz questions. Make sure that students can ask questions and or encourage students to take part in discussions. If you can, try and link the session to previously covered topics on the course. This is difficult for guest lecturers sometimes, so it might be easier for a member of the core teaching team to do that. Within the lecture content, make sure that you try and explain concepts in more concrete terms where possible. So, for example, in DHR, use an existing to illustrate the topic that you're talking about. And then within each 1 hour session or lecture, try and divide it into 3 50-minute topics so that you have kind of a 5-minute break between each topic where you can include discussion prompts. So finally, look at the student feedback we've had. So we're awaiting results for formal feedback for EVASIS for the latest run of the evaluating course. However, the informal student feedback that we've had has been very positive. So you can see there, students have said that it's a very organized course. It really makes it clear what the objectives are and how they should plan their learning. Students also found it helpful in terms of understanding how co-production works in practice. So yeah, very good feedback from students in terms of how to engage with the course content, but also plan their learning in order to meet all the expectations of the course. So that's all the slides I had for this morning. I'm happy to be contacted if you have any questions, have a chat about what we did. And again, the templates can be accessed. So I'll share a link in the chat so that you can have a look at those. So now if anyone has any.
Thanks very much, Julien. That was great. Have you any questions at all? Perhaps while we're thinking about that just now, I just have one question, and it relates back to what Moira and Mia were talking about in terms of inclusivity. So given that staff and students were inputting into these kind of lesson plans and pedagogic principles, how did inclusivity feature within that?
Well, so the inclusivity was included. I mean, it's quite a difficult question because it's practice from the very beginning, and we wanted students to have the last say in terms of what the lesson plan would look like and the kind of stuff that'll be in it. It was also quite difficult because it was an optional project, so we couldn't really. We had 9 students on the course, so it was quite a good turnout to have 5 students take part in it. And within that, we were quite lucky that the one international student we had, who was from China, did take part. So that was very useful in terms of finding out what their experience of the course was and whether or not they had any specific needs or challenges that they faced. So I couldn't cover that in the presentation because it was quite short. One of the things that they talked about was that for them, the lecture transcripts were actually quite useful, whereas for all the other kind of home students, they never used them or engaged with the transcript that we produced. But that it wasn't as useful because obviously it's impossible to have it accurate. So something that came out from their involvement with the project was that if we could point them in the direction of kind of effective translation tools, it would be very helpful for them in terms of being able to go back and revisit the course content or the lecture recordings. Yeah, I mean that's what I can really think about in terms of inclusivity for the project.
Yeah, that's great. That sounds really good. It's very inclusive. And you've added a link in the chat, which is obviously to share the resources.
Yeah, I've shared that, so hopefully that should work.
Okay, fantastic. And Dustin's just commented a good compliment to ABC Learning Design. Did you want to expand on that, Dustin? I don't know if you're able to turn your mic off on or your camera. Oh, we can't hear you.
Let me just get a link. I'll put it in the chat. It's ABC Learning Design is just a curriculum learning design, which breaks down the activities into 6 different learning types. It's based upon Diana W.O.R.D.'s, help me, Vicky, approaches to
6 learning
curriculum
types.
design. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's there's a lot of research on it and there's a lot of practice on it. And we even use it here at Glasgow for the micro-credentials and for the MOOCs as well. So this looks like a good complement to it. You can see it in the link there. It's originally from UCL, but it's been localized to so many different contexts around the world. And it's a good kind of social thing to do, whether online or offline in person. Yeah.
Thanks, Dustin. That's great. Thanks for sharing that.
Welcome.
I think it's good to pull the best of different pedagogical models together, and certainly what you're doing in terms of consistency across different lessons looks really powerful, Julien. Thank you very much. So let's just thank Julien again, and then we'll move on to our next presentation. Thanks, Julien.
Thank you.
Okay. So if we move on now, we have got Stephen Dunn and Harry Wheeler, and this is work they've done with Robert McKerlie on an inclusive exploration of CAD-CAM, a staff-student partnership to integrate digital workflow into the curriculum. Sounds fascinating. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicky. I'll just share my screen just now. Hope everyone can see that okay. So good morning and welcome to our project, and it's entitled An Inclusive Exploration of CAD-CAM, a staff-student partnership that aims to integrate the digital workflow into the curriculum. And I'm Mr. Stephen Dunn, and I'm a lecturer of dental technology at the Glasgow Dental School, which is a 5-year Bachelor's of Dental Surgery programme. And Harry, you can introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Harry Wheeler. I am on said programme. I'm second year of the BDS and I have a postgrad as well. So I've previously done a master's and a BA.
Thank you, Harry. Mr. McKerlie, he wasn't planning to present this today. However, he's not at the conference because he has teaching commitments, though. So it was a real kind of pillar during this project, our guide on the side, so to speak. So I'll just move on. So this was our CAD-CAM suite where we carried out the project, and at the moment it's positioned in the preclinical skills laboratory in the dental school. To be honest, it's not a great teaching space. It's very limited, and what you can actually fit in there at the moment, and that's before COVID took over as well. So there is the barriers that are there, the limitations in the sense of trying to integrate this into the curriculum. We need to start to look to develop, and facilitate a better teaching space for this technology. So that's something that we need to do quite quickly. And a nice disclaimer from myself and Harry: we're certainly not CAD-CAM experts by any means. It's the title and the exploration of CAD-CAM. It was very much for us, so it was a bit of fun. We got to test limitations of materials and things like that. So it was very much, just about exploring how we can use this technology. So what we decided is we had the CAD suite was already within the teaching facility for several years. So I've already had experience of doing that as a member of staff. But what we purchased last year was the 3D printing aspect, which introduces the computer-aided manufacturing. And that was something that we had really not very much knowledge of within the dental school. However, Mr. McKerlie introduced the technical wizard that is Harry, so he can introduce why he got involved and why this staff-student partnership actually kind of had grown.
Yes, sorry, I think my mic wasn't working properly, but hopefully you can all hear me a bit better now. So yeah, in lockdown, as I'm sure a lot of us were, I got a bit bored, and I decided to give 3D printing a go because I'm a nerd and I like that sort of stuff. I mentioned it to Mr. McKerlie, and he instantly became very interested in getting a 3D printing software set up a system set up that we could investigate how we could use this in dentistry. And since then, we've just been working on firstly how to use the printers, because it's not a simple process, and sort of get an idea of the extent and the depth that we can reach with what we can do with it.
Yes, so that's essentially what driven, this kind of inclusive aspect where Harry became involved in this project to try and, take us forward. And that was certainly, it was a real merit to the university from that perspective. We wouldn't have got as far as we have without his expertise or his knowledge and skills in that department. Advocate of the staff-student partnerships, as Moira Fishbacker highlighted today, is very much part of the university learning and teaching strategy. I've been part of a staff-student partnership before, so I have experience where the Moodle platform, for example, we use at dental school has been elevated and to support student learning at the moment because of a staff-student partnership. There's also been other good examples within the dental school and certainly at the University of Glasgow Learning and Teaching Conference. So we can move forward with confidence in this approach. So to provide a bit of context of what the students are doing, our Year 2 students are examined on their ability to design and prescribe removable partial dentures. However, the majority of these students have never seen a partial denture before. So this teaching is actually delivered to the students prior to them having any clinical experience. So they've never even seen a patient before. So therefore, it's kind of, if they've not seen a patient, then the biggest challenge for the students is trying to understand how all the components of these dentures come together through the different designs and what they're actually going to look like. And Harry's going to kind of highlight his feelings on this as a BDS2 student.
Yeah, when we initially started this, I remember this being really difficult conceptually to understand, because there's lots of different rules and ideas you have to follow. And the trickiest part is visualizing just how it all comes together, which is where the CAD CAM comes in and it makes it 100 times easier. I think that my understanding of RPDs is a lot better because of the work I've been doing, which highlights just how useful it could be for the education of this particular subject.
So you might be thinking, removable partial dentures, a kind of a historic old technology, and looking at immersive technologies and CAD-CAM, how does that kind of link together? So it's important we do understand that, there's mileage in this project as well. So looking at the abundance of literature that was actually out there, Locke et al. Reveals that there's an increased global demand for removable partial dentures, which is nice to know. Removable partial dentures remain a widely used treatment option to restore function in partially edentulous patients in current practice, and that was part of a huge systematic review. And for many years, it's been recognised that a fundamental problem exists among the dental profession when prescribing, designing and fabricating removable partial dentures. And that's across the whole dental profession. So not just looking at students, so we have to kind of try and identify and address these problems. And I'm hoping that that's what we're aiming to do. So it's nice to see we've got support there within the literature. Now, previously, students had hands-on experience of fabricating cobalt chrome partial denture frameworks, and that was within the preclinical skills lab. However, this procedure was stopped over about 20 years ago, and that was on the advice of the University Health and Safety Officer. There was a kind of reoccurring hand injuries problem that was going on, and I believe that the thoughts were students' hands were quite important to be a dentist. I think Harry will certainly agree with that. I think most of us will agree with that. So it was unfortunate that this left a significant gap in the students' understanding of what they're actually designing. And when you look at the framework, it looks dangerous to put near a patient's mouth, never mind trying to cut elements of that with a high-speed grinder. So unfortunately, that has left the gap in their understanding. So Harry's going to talk you through some of the complexities of prescribing a partial denture using this system of design and why the CAD-CAM system has helped students learning and understanding.
So this is a typical prescribing sheet which we would design. This is one which I made a couple of weeks ago as part of my assessment. And as you can see, it doesn't look too much like the metallic structures which we are aiming for. We basically draw out the components on their own, and you can't really visualize how it comes together. and it's very important that you understand how that also interacts with the patient's mouth. On these drawings, we can't see the actual shape of what is currently there that we have to fit to, which is one limit of it. If I can get the next slide, please. So this first picture is another two-dimensional drawing of a prescription for one of these dentures. But as you try to recreate this on the CAD software, it sort of comes to life, and you can see how it goes onto a patient's mouth, a patient's teeth, and how it fits. And of course, like, you get a digital representation of the metallic object you would create, and that visually is more effective than any of the two-dimensional drawings by far. And if I get the next slide. And beyond that, CAD/CAM in clinical dentistry is becoming a very big factor. This first picture is actually from my own, it's my own teeth from my own Invisalign case. And what I love about this is I can access this at any time as a patient, and I can look at it and I can see what treatments I'm going to get. And then you couple that with other elements such as milling or 3D printing, and a clinical practice for dentistry just takes a whole new level, which is where I think this project could eventually point to in terms of education. We could start to teach about these particular aspects, which is going to be the future of dentistry. Yeah.
Okay, so I thought it would be relatively important to share with you the wider universe, some examples of 3D printing in other industries. I was absolutely fascinated to find out, we looked at a report from during this kind of project, and to find out that the actual swabs that were used in the COVID testing kits were actually printed off, 3D printed off by Formlabs. And that was, an approach to try and catch up with the global demand of, testing kits for COVID. And this is something that, I'm pretty sure many of us have used over hundreds of times in the last year or so. So, you just never know where this kind of CAD/CAM can maybe fit in your practice. So the 3D printing has moved beyond the early adopter phase, but it still shows signs of growth and expansion into new industries and applications. So you can see through some of the images there that, trainers, running trainers are being printed from the sole. So as well as dental appliances, you've got jewellery as well, which is quite linked and close to dental technology, how that process comes together. You also have modelling. End-of-use parts is quite a big printing element for companies as well, because they've got machinery that no longer they can have a part for, but that part of machinery is integral to what they do. So they're actually scanning and printing some parts. So as well as, looking at dental things, I'm hoping, we are very much catching up and behind the curve with this. Okay, so Glasgow, in a sense, is trying to catch up globally, what's happening with CAD/CAM. So you might find there's something within your practice that you can identify. You might actually want to use CAD/CAM in your academic practice.
Yeah, and here we can sort of see a breakdown of which end users are using 3D printing software, and in this category, business owner would be a dental practice. But the most interesting part about these graphics is the adoption of 3D printing in North America compared to the rest of the world. And this reflects the digital dentistry movement. Digital dentistry in North America is becoming a very rapidly growing industry. And I think we're going to see that acceleration towards a digital workflow over here in the future, very near future.
Thank you, Harry. So again, looking at, where we are with the computer-aided design and stuff, we want to look at the literature again and see, has it got mileage? Are we wasting our time looking at this kind of thing? So computer-aided design and computer-aided manufacturing is an important and irreplaceable technology in contemporary dentistry. So that's nice to know. There's no doubt that a digital revolution in dentistry has arrived with the advanced development of digital workflows. So it's here, but we're still a bit far behind. We need to do a wee bit more. Dental educators must also stay current with emerging technologies as they are developed and implemented in order to provide the most comprehensive education for their students. So again, highlighted in the conference today that again we need to be doing more of this. Digital dentistry, including CAD/CAM dentistry, is perhaps the most disruptive innovation in dentistry to date. So it sounds a bit like I've burst the CAD/CAM rhetoric a little bit, but looking at the digital innovations have certainly disrupted dentistry, and that's in many fronts with new techniques. There's new materials and new systems, and it's really expensive equipment to take this on board. So the literature does reveal that the state-of-the-art and fresh digital approach has certainly improved the patient experience. There's more restorations available, bringing greater efficiency and greater accuracy in that as well. So although the digital innovations have certainly been disruptive, it's certainly not destructive. So very recently we did a student survey and an poll kind of class survey, and 64 BDS Year 2 students were asked if they had any understanding of the digital workflow in dentistry prior to their digital design session. This was only last month, and and overwhelmingly 93% had said no, and only 7% said yes. And Harry's actually part of that 7%, so we're not exactly breaking the barriers here, and this is certainly our objective. So it should certainly be getting BDS1 involved, maybe doing some intraoral scanning. So hopefully this time next year, we'll have 100% of the student cohort saying that they've got an understanding and knowledge of this kind of workflow. So this is a kind of, a still image of some of the CAD work that we did in the digital design element of things. So again, this was only done last month, and the students have spent a significant amount of their time working through the theoretical knowledge of how these partial dentures come together, and they've designed that on a piece of paper. So when they actually bring this to the CAD suite, you actually see the light bulb moment in their faces when they actually see how these components all come together, why they all connect. And it's an actual privilege to actually see that happening right in front of you. So the students absolutely love these immersive technologies, and actually just highlights again everything that they've learned. All the consolidation of all the theory just happens on the screen within about an hour. And I think Harry's going to explain a wee bit more about that.
Yeah, so this is for me where it started to click. When we started doing this, I started to see, oh, okay, so this connects to this bit, this connects to this bit, and this very much brings together the whole thing. And I'm very interested in this as well, because it's not only if you're scanning a patient's mouth rather than taking a model, it's more environmentally friendly as well. You don't have to use all of the different materials which go into designing a partial denture, and there's a lot of materials. So that, from an environmental standpoint, is something which is also quite big in dentistry right now. We're very concerned about the environmental impact of what we do. So that's another big factor of why I think this is the direction forward. From an education standpoint, I really think this could be a gold standard in learning how to construct partial dentures.
Totally agree, Harry. And we've got a nice visual demonstration of the CAD framework filling the gap. I'm more than aware of these kind of dental little puns that keep getting popped into this presentation. But so the two-dimensional framework that the students draw is still very important. It's still part of a prescription they have to send to the lab. So it's a legal document. So they still have to be very adequate to do that. But to design that two-dimensional drawing to what they're actually going to get from the laboratory, the cobalt chrome framework, at year 2, they've never seen that, So the CAD framework certainly it's a great kind of simulation to what they're going to be getting from the lab. And at BDS2, they're not going to see this cobalt chrome framework, so it just gives them that little introduction to what they'll be seeing on clinic when it gets to year 3. So I hope you agree that kind of simulation there just provides the students so much more detail to what they're actually going to get later on. So Harry's going to talk us through. This is when we went from, the simulations on the screen, and this is when the fun began, when we started to print off what we were designing from the screen to, a printed resin. So Harry's going to talk through some of that process.
So we're not quite at the stage yet where we can click and play, just print anything, take it out, it's done. There's still a few more complicated steps which you have to do. For example, you have to wash the resin and then put it in the light box to finally cure it to make sure it's properly hard. And we're still developing the 3D printing technology. It's still getting better and better to the point where I think very soon we will just be able to press a button and one big machine will just handle it and print it and it's done. Which is probably where the biggest application for dentistry is going to lie. But as we said before, this can be applied to any manufacturing industry, any kind of engineering or designing, and of course education as well. So yeah, this is only going to get better and more accessible to everyone as it goes on.
Even through this project alone, I've actually been taking this forward to assessments that are happening in the dental school this year. Already artifacts have been created for student assessments, so it's certainly helping move us along. These are some of the kind of products that we successfully printed on our project. Looking at that framework, it's certainly not fit for a patient to wear, but it gives the students an absolute fantastic opportunity to then fit that to the cast, to get tactile with the framework. It might not be as strong as a metal framework, but it certainly gives them that opportunity to see how it all fits around the dental cast. And this is, it's really you talk about a different dimension. It really does put a different dimension on the CAD element where students are actually asked to present this work in class or in front of a panel, and the students can actually give the panel this as they've designed it. They've invested their time and their theoretical knowledge to actually making these. So it's a really nice moment to give the panel the framework that you have designed while you present that work.
Yeah, I agree, and it's going to be very interesting to be able to design something, print it, and then present it to someone. And the simple matter of fact is, if you put one of these frameworks on a model, you can see and you can feel how it fits, and you can have a look at it before you go through the process of making the metal one, which takes a lot of resources and time to do.
Yeah, we did spend a significant amount of time printing these off because some of them were just too thin; they were breaking very easily. So it was taking that time to actually get the kind of the sizes correct and things, and that was a big part of our project, especially time-wise. So looking forward, this is some statements from the University of Glasgow Dental School, our PSR reflective analysis report, and this was only last month. So it's within the report, it's saying dentistry is continually changing, and we're seeing a move to the digital environment. So again, giving us some reassurance with these kind of projects, and we continue to evolve our curriculum to reflect this shift. And kind of an action within the report was, if we are to avoid being left behind, we need further investment in digital dentistry. So it's very reassuring, that the dental school is, feeling this as well. We want to be doing better as a global university. We want to be making ourselves, known and appreciated for the work we're doing. Certainly given the learning teaching strategy, a boost as well is hopefully what we're aiming for. So although we believe that we have a comprehensive and robust curriculum, it's important that the curriculum is progressive, dynamic, and ever evolving to meet the needs of modern dentistry and academic excellence. Do you have anything you want to say on that, Harry?
No, I think it's right. I'm very happy that the dental schools managed to identify this as an area going forward, because I'm of the opinion that it's going to be common practice, at least before the end of my career, to have this technology in place. So the quicker I can learn to use it, and the quicker the rest of my cohort can learn to use it and be more aware of it, it's just going to benefit our career endlessly.
Yeah, so it's inspiring for you as a student as well, because it's preparing you for the future, not just what dentists are doing just now in Glasgow, but looking at the future as well.
Mm-hmm.
So these are some of the references that we've mentioned throughout there, especially if you're looking at printing for something within your academic practice. I would certainly point you to the Formlabs report. That I found that very interesting. And thank you very much for listening. And it's been an honour for us to present and disseminate our project to the wider university community. So thanks very much for listening, folks.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Stephen and Harry. That was excellent. As somebody who experienced dentistry in Glasgow in the 1970s, this is definitely a welcome development. So Gordon had a question. Gordon, do you want to unmute and come in? Okay, we'll just read his question out.
Just having trouble
Oh,
finding the
yes.
mic button there.
Oh,
It was hidden. It was just a quick question. The tech on this is constantly evolving. I'm just curious how you actually picked what to go with and what did that cost you to implement and run it for a year? Just so that other programs can have an idea of what would be involved.
yeah, that's a great question, Gordon. Yeah, it's very much a limitation of our project. As you know, this system was already in the dental school, and if it was first purchased, it was like £30,000 just for the CAD alone. But that has significantly come down. You know, for example, a 3D printer at that time was £30,000. So the dental school purchased the CAD system because of the expenditure in that. And, you know, last year, the 3D printer was only £3,000. So the prices are significantly coming down. However, there's always a catch with 3D printing where, you know, the cartridges hold resin tanks and they can cost about £120 a litre. So, you know, there's a kind of, that's their growth, you know, that they're kind of using that to, like a printer at home, you're going to keep topping it up, I think. So there's certainly it's a big step, you know, to actually use this kind of technology, but it's a case of not using the technology because it's a new shiny thing and everyone wants one. It's about, you know, proving the concepts that this technology is going to enhance learning for the students. It's something that you know, in the future they'll be looking to do in their clinical practice as well.
And as well, we went for a high-end 3D printer. We wanted the best of the best to try and identify how we could put this into the curriculum and where it could go for dentistry, because that's what you need for clinical work. You need the gold standard. But for me, my 3D printer cost me £200, and I got it on Amazon, and it came next day. And it's incredibly cheap if you want a basic 3D printer that just does that just does it. And
I think that's a really good example of the difference between something that's just your proof of concept and something you'll actually be using to put a model in someone's mouth. Thank you for that. That's a useful price comparison.
Yeah, and I think some of the dental software, Gordon, as well, they will charge you, you know, like thousands of pounds over a 5-year period, and that's just for educational. That's not for manufacturing for patients. So it is something you need to consider, you know. But the fact that Harry could get that for £200, and
it came with all the software as well. All of the software came for free with my 3D printer as well. So and again, it's obviously not as robust and as clinical as our one, but it still, you know, does the job at a very basic level.
You make me want to go to eBay now.
That's excellent, Gordon. That's excellent.
I think what was really nice about that as well is this idea that the students working with their hands as well, that kind of embodied learning and kind of inspiring them and you know, having these threshold concept moments, I think is really valuable. Okay,
it was a very valuable staff-student partnership, Vicky. I felt, you know, Harry, we did very much, it was a very much collaboration of, you know, everyone on the same level. There was no restrictive staff-student barriers, you know. We were making silly mistakes and we were, you know, making a mess at things, but it was all just in the aim of, you know, learning and enjoying that moment. So it was a very nice example of a staff-student partnership. I hope some other, you know, peers and things like that might want to think about doing the same.
Fantastic. I think a lot of people want to transpose those concepts into their own discipline. Thank you.
Yeah. You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to our next talk. So this is Ailsa, Frew, Laura Sharp, who I see we've got Laura with us, Mia Wilson, Laura McNaughton, and Julien Langan Martin, and we've got Mia here as well. You're going to talk about ensuring diversity in learning materials whose word counts. So over to you.
Hiya, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
I think I'm echoing back myself, that's not good. We're actually taking, Julie's here as well, taking a bit of a different approach today. So I've added into the the chat function, a link to our presentation. All of our resources and all of our resources are available online for the students. So we thought, in order to demonstrate the approach that we take, if we send you there for sort of 8 to 10 minutes is all it should take. Have a look through it, and we'll stay here live. If there's any questions, then we can hopefully do it that way. Can somebody have a click on there and just make sure they can see it?
I can see it, but I don't know if
Yeah, Cosba's just confirmed it. Matthew as well. Fantastic, thank you. So this will be available afterwards as well. So you can come back to it, or you can save the link. Hi there. Sorry, I just thought I should open up in case of any other questions. I'm aware of the time is passing. Sue's answered a couple of questions which I've addressed, I think. If Mia or Julie have anything else to add, then pop it in. Oh, thanks, Julien. And Cosma, I think, yeah, it's good to know that we've offered some inspiration of how you could apply some of it.
You've got about 6 minutes left, Laura. I know we're running over time a little bit, but there's still time for more questions. I'm assuming everyone's had the chance to work through the material.
It'd be helpful if we could actually see how progress is going.
Yeah,
At least in Moodle, we can kind of document it a wee bit.
that's right. I guess it just illustrates perfectly how you can engage in a different format, and that sort of speaks to the inclusivity theme of the conference, doesn't it? That we all participate in different ways.
Yeah, yeah.
So you've addressed most questions in the text. Is there anything you wanted to speak to?
I don't think there was anything specifically. No.
The question about creating opportunities as safe spaces, I think we've made a really strong effort throughout all the online learning materials and continue to do so to ensure that wherever there are any sensitive topics discussed, there are content warnings throughout. We offer self-care resources at the start of each module. So that's the online discussions, and that's also in the class space that we have. We quite often monitor that for any sensitive activity. So if people are, we tend to moderate the comments, making sure that everything is kept to a degree that we feel is appropriate, and we encourage the students to contact the course team if there is anything in particular that they're finding distressing. And then personally, I am an ex-alumni of the programme, so when there was in-person class discussions, there was always a kind of disclaimer at the start, what was going to be covered, and if it was at any point distressing, there was the option to take a break, to leave. So I don't know if anyone else has anything else that they would like to add with regards to that.
I think you've got another question from Anna Yelland. Are the case studies used to illustrate scenarios in various high, middle and low income contexts worldwide available?
Yes, we have a wide array of case studies from not only high, middle and low income contexts, but different regions within specific countries as well, to highlight that there's a lot of diversity, within a single country, within different parts of a country. So yeah, and then also, within certain countries as well, we often look at the distinction between urban versus rural. So we quite often use case studies that explore comparisons in different ways.
Great. Okay.
I'm not sure, Anna, if you were asking if you were able to access them. If that's something that you were looking to look at some of the content in a bit more detail, then just get in touch and we can share some of that if it's useful. One last thing, Sue had mentioned, have we actually asked the students, the live students, hopefully they're all live, the current students, about their particular interest in this. So that's something that we could potentially think about for next year, I think. Looking at Julie's face and Mia's face, but we could maybe mention to the students that that's something that we've actively tried to address this year, and request that they are kind of hyper vigilant, and we do find the students are happy to come back to us with these kind of things and very much engage. So.
Okay, have we got another question in the Q&A, perhaps?
I think just there's something about the reviewer that's difficult to speak to, I think, because Ailsa is unfortunately able to be here, about her, whether she found the process difficult. I know she certainly took her time. It was a very thoughtful, considered process. She did it over a long period of time, you know, so a few hours each week, which I can't speak for her, but I would imagine that that would have helped in order to help her work through any material that was coming up for her, and also to reflect between her review sessions on things that she would like to incorporate or look at further. So, but yeah, you would need to. I couldn't speak definitively for her.
She was very happy, and it did seem to be something that she was very sensitive to, and that she did recognise things that, you know, all of our content's developed within a group scenario. So we had all developed it trying to be considerate to these things, but she was able to look at it and spot some things that maybe we hadn't picked up. Sorry, I hadn't realised it was a separate thing for question and answer and chat, so I was focusing in on the chat. So sorry, totally missed that.
Okay, well, we're about 20 past 11, and I know the next session starts at past. So can I suggest that if you have additional questions, you might want to meet up with the team over coffee at the tables and follow up in those discussions. Demeter asked a question about how to switch the audio on without exiting the room. I don't think that's possible. I think you have to stay in the room for the audio to work. Okay, so I'd just like to thank all our presenters, Julien, Stephen and Harry, and Laura, Julie and Mia today. If we could all just thank everyone for their great presentations, and we'll move on into the coffee break. Thank you very much.